Imagine a story of love denied, arrogance exposed, and a nation's destiny reshaped by one man's quiet courage. This is the story of Ibrahim Traoré, the soldier who was rejected by a wealthy family, only to rise above their pride and show the world what true strength and integrity look like. Before we dive in, make sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and comment below, because this is a story that proves even the smallest acts of cruelty can awaken the greatest forces of justice. Stay with us, because what happens next will shock you, inspire you, and remind you that destiny always finds a way. The night air was heavy, thick with the kind of silence that suffocates rather than comforts. Outside the grand mansion, with its walls shimmering beneath pale moonlight, a solitary figure stood still, his shadow stretching long across the gravel. Ibrahim Traoré did not speak, nor did he move, for movement would have betrayed the storm inside his chest. The gates had closed behind him with a sound that echoed far louder than iron should. A sound of finality, a verdict, a rejection that was not merely personal. It carried the weight of a nation's arrogance. Inside that mansion, laughter still drifted out like poisoned perfume. The wealthy family had dismissed him, not with words of reason, but with daggers of contempt. He was, in their eyes, unworthy. A soldier of no significance, a man of no standing, a dreamer without fortune daring to imagine himself equal to them. They did not know who he truly was, and perhaps that ignorance was their greatest crime. They had spat upon dignity, blind to the fact that they spat upon power itself. Yet Ibrahim did not reveal himself. He could have spoken the truth, could have let the weight of his title crash upon them like thunder. But silence was more dangerous than any declaration. Silence had memory, and in that silence was a rage too controlled to be dismissed. He walked away from the mansion's gates with no witnesses to his grief. His footsteps pressed against the earth as if it bore his burden, and behind each step lay the ghost of what could have been. A love not bound by politics or bloodlines, but by the rare tenderness he had discovered in their daughter's eyes. Love, however, is fragile in the face of pride. And pride was the poison that ran thick in that family's veins. The city slept unaware. Its people struggled in ways that this mansion of opulence could never imagine. Hungry children huddled in shacks. Mothers whispered empty promises over empty plates. Fathers bent their backs under debts that never ceased to multiply. Yet within gilded halls, wine flowed like rivers, jewels dripped from necks, and the music of arrogance drowned out the cries of the forgotten. It was into this world that Ibrahim had been cast, a world that measured worth by gold rather than by character. And tonight, that world had chosen to deny him. But Ibrahim was no stranger to denial. His life had been forged in its furnace. Born into struggle, raised on stories of Thomas Sankara's unfulfilled vision, and tempered by years of discipline, he had never been granted an easy path. The scars on his hands told the truth better than any crown could. Every battle fought, every betrayal endured, every night of hunger faced in silence. It had all built him into something far greater than what these men of marble halls could comprehend. And still, he was human. Beneath the title, beneath the armor of duty, lay a heart that sought companionship. In her he had found it. Gentleness among the harshness of his days, a reminder that beyond politics and power, there existed the possibility of simple happiness. That possibility had been ripped away, not because of who he was, but because of who they thought he wasn't. The rejection replayed in his mind with cruel precision. The father's voice, sharp with disdain, asking how a man of no family name dared to reach for theirs. The mother's cold eyes scanning him as though he were a stain upon her perfect floor. The brother's mocking laughter, each syllable a blade. And her, the daughter, silent, trembling, eyes filled with shame not for him, but for the cruelty of those who claimed to love her. She had tried to speak, but her voice had drowned beneath their scorn, so he had left. Left not as a beggar turned away, but as a man who carried within him the unspoken truth. He was the President of Burkina Faso, and the irony of their blindness would one day consume them. The walk through the city was long, yet Ibrahim welcomed the distance. It gave him time to observe what truly mattered, the streets lined with vendors who had nothing to sell. The faint glow of candles where electricity had long abandoned, the hushed prayers of the old who still hoped for salvation. These were his people. These were the ones whose hands had built the nation while the arrogant few feasted upon its wealth. And though tonight he felt the sting of personal loss, he also felt the reminder of his purpose. Perhaps love had been denied him so that destiny could claim him fully. He remembered his childhood in a village where dreams were smaller than survival. The cracked earth that refused to yield crops, the eyes of his mother who fed her children before feeding herself, the endless lessons of humility etched by hardship. From those beginnings, Ibrahim had risen not by inheritance but by endurance. He had chosen the path of the soldier, not for glory, but for the chance to protect what little his people had left. Each rank he earned was carved from sweat and sacrifice. Each step closer to power was shadowed by betrayal. And yet in spite of it all, he had carried within him the belief that love could still find him. Tonight had extinguished that light, but rejection has a way of planting seeds. As he walked through narrow streets where whispers followed his unseen presence, he felt something shift inside him. The humiliation no longer burned as it had minutes before. It hardened into something else, resolve, for what was denied to him in private could be transformed into power in public. They thought him beneath them, but he would rise above them not through vengeance, but through vision. The mansion behind him would one day crumble under the weight of its own arrogance. The family that mocked him would live to regret the blindness of their pride, not because he would strike them down, but because the world would unveil the truth of who he was, and they would stand as fools in the light of revelation. History would not remember their wealth or their sneers. It would remember the man they rejected, the leader they dismissed, and the nation he would transform. Yet tonight, Ibrahim allowed himself one moment of grief. Beneath a sky littered with stars that bore a silent witness, he paused, closing his eyes. He thought of her, the daughter whose tears had fallen like invisible rain. Was she a prisoner of their arrogance or a willing accomplice to their pride? He did not know. Perhaps he never would. All he knew was that her silence had carved a deeper wound than her family's words. And so he let her image fade, burying it alongside every sacrifice he had made in his journey. Love would no longer guide him. Only destiny would. As the dawn approached, the city stirred with the muted sounds of survival. Ibrahim walked toward the horizon, where shadows retreated and light exposed the truth. He was no longer merely a man rejected by a wicked family. He was something else now, something more dangerous, more powerful, more enduring. In his silence was a story the world had yet to hear, and when that story was told, it would shake the very foundations of arrogance itself. The mansion's gates had closed, but the echo of what transpired did not remain confined to its walls. Whispers spread like wildfire through the city, twisting with every retelling. The tale was never told in truth. Instead, it traveled as rumor does, gathering malice, exaggeration, and poison. A poor soldier, they said, tried to marry into wealth and was thrown out like a beggar. Laughter clung to the story like chains, carrying it from the markets to the cafes, from dusty roads to government corridors. Ibrahim heard the whispers too, but he did not correct them. He allowed the city to believe he had been humiliated, for sometimes silence was the most dangerous weapon of all. The family basked in their cruelty. In drawing rooms lit by golden chandeliers, they spoke of the night as if it were a triumph, proof of their superiority. The father boasted to his associates that he had preserved the family's honor, preventing his daughter from descending into disgrace by marrying beneath her station. The mother paraded her pride as though cruelty were virtue, declaring that their bloodline would never be tainted by mediocrity. The brothers, drunk with arrogance, mocked the man they thought a commoner. They had not just rejected Ibrahim, they had declared war on humility itself. But arrogance blinds more than the eyes. It blinds the heart. It blinds judgment. It blinds the ability to see the storm that gathers quietly beyond the horizon. As the family celebrated, the city decayed. Streets that once echoed with laughter now groaned under the weight of hunger. Shops shuttered. Fields yielded little. A silent famine stalked the land like a predator, taking children first, then mothers, then fathers who had nothing left to give. The people began to murmur, not just about their hunger, but about the hypocrisy of those who lived in excess while the nation starved. And in those murmurs, the story of the rejected soldier began to shift. Who was he? Why did he stand so tall, even as he was mocked? Why did he walk away with such silence rather than desperation? Suspicion grew like roots beneath the soil. Some whispered he was not what he seemed. Others said the family's cruelty would not go unanswered. Then came the accidents. The first was small, barely noticed by the outside world. A business deal that had promised the father vast profits collapsed overnight. The partners who once bowed before him vanished, leaving debts in their wake. He dismissed it as misfortune, yet unease gnawed at the edges of his pride. The second struck harder. One of the brothers, returning from a night of indulgence, lost control of his car. He survived, but his body carried scars that wealth could not erase. At the hospital, whispers rose among the staff. Perhaps it is the curse of pride, they said, though never loud enough for him to hear. The third shattered their illusion of invincibility. The mother, once the image of elegance, fell ill with a sickness no doctor could diagnose. Medicine failed. Remedies mocked them. Her once commanding presence withered, and for the first time, the family tasted the bitterness of helplessness. But still they clung to arrogance. Still they refused to see. Ibrahim, meanwhile, walked among his people. He wore no crown, no title upon his chest. He was a soldier to their eyes, a man of simple bearing, yet his silence carried weight. Children gravitated toward him without knowing why. The elderly blessed him without knowing his name. He listened to their suffering, each story carving deeper into his heart. For though he had been denied love, he had not been denied duty. And in that duty, he discovered a greater truth. The rejection that had humiliated him was a mirror of the nation itself. The wicked family was but a symbol of a greater arrogance, the arrogance of the powerful who had forgotten the people. Still, his heart could not escape thoughts of her. The daughter, the one who had remained silent. He wondered if she wept behind her gilded prison, or if she had accepted her family's cruelty as her own. He wondered if she had ever loved him, or if her love had been too weak to stand against the weight of their pride. In sleepless nights, these questions haunted him more than hunger, more than politics. The city began to stir with strange stories. Some claimed they had seen the soldier wandering the streets at night, his face lit by the glow of torches, speaking softly to the poor. Others swore they had glimpsed him at rallies where the people cried out for change, though he never took the stage. Rumors painted him as both ghost and savior, an enigma who carried the weight of destiny on his shoulders. The wicked family, however, remained blind. They dismissed the stories, calling them tales of desperate peasants. But unease crept through their holes. Servants whispered when they thought no one listened. Guests who once came eagerly to their dinners now excused themselves with vague reasons. The mansion's glow began to dim, its grandeur hollowed by unseen shadows. Then came the night of the storm. The sky split with thunder, rain lashing against the earth as though heaven itself sought to cleanse it. The mansion, built upon arrogance, stood illuminated by flashes of lightning. Inside, the family gathered around their long table, their faces tight with unease. The father poured wine with a trembling hand. The mother's eyes, once sharp, now darted nervously. The brothers muttered curses under their breath, unwilling to admit fear, and in that storm, a letter arrived. No messenger was seen. No footsteps marked the wet ground. Yet upon the table lay an envelope sealed with wax, its edges dry despite the rain. The father opened it with impatience, only to freeze as his eyes devoured the words. His face drained of color. His hand shook. The letter contained no threats, no curses, only a truth. The man they had mocked, the soldier they had rejected, was none other than the President of Burkina Faso. The silence that followed was thicker than the storm outside. Each member of the family felt the walls close in, the weight of their arrogance pressing upon them. Their daughter wept openly, her tears finally freed. The brothers, once so bold, stared at one another with fear. The mother, pale with sickness, whispered prayers that would not be answered. And the father, the man who had mocked most loudly, sank into his chair as though the earth itself sought to swallow him. Far from the mansion, Ibrahim stood in the rain. He did not seek revenge, nor did he revel in their fear. He merely watched the storm wash the city clean, his face calm, his heart heavy but unbroken. He had been denied by a family but embraced by a nation. And though his personal sorrow remained, it was now dwarfed by a greater calling, for the people were beginning to rise. And the mansion's arrogance would not stand against the tide forever. The city's streets buzzed with a tension that had been absent for decades. Markets opened reluctantly, as if even the merchants feared to stir the undercurrent of destiny that whispered through every alley and corner. News of the mansion's mysterious letter spread faster than the storm itself, carried by those who had little else but curiosity and hope. Even the poorest children knew the tale. The soldier rejected for love had become the man who ruled the nation. And with that knowledge, the air seemed to shift. The invisible weight of power had moved, and no one could ignore it. Inside the mansion, the family tried to mask their fear with a facade of composure. The father paced endlessly, muttering words that would have sounded commanding on any other day, but fell hollow in the shadow of revelation. The mother fumbled with her illness, seeking remedies that would not cure her, while the brothers eyed one another warily, each wondering who among them might be punished first, not by law, but by destiny itself. The daughter remained silent, but her gaze followed every move, her mind a whirlwind of guilt, sorrow, and longing. She had loved him, perhaps more deeply than she had allowed herself to admit, and now the man she had denied was revealed as someone untouchable, someone sovereign, someone untamed by their arrogance. Yet Ibrahim remained distant. He did not approach the mansion, nor did he send another letter. The city's murmurs reached him as he walked through the neighborhoods where children played in mud puddles and women carried water in bent arms. He observed the grinding reality of life for those who had nothing to shield them, and he thought of the family whose privilege insulated them from consequence. Until now. He felt no satisfaction in their suffering. Power without compassion was meaningless, and he had learned that lesson long ago. Still, he allowed the storm of truth to unfold, like a seed planted in soil that had long been infertile. The family decided to host a grand gala, perhaps to reassert their dominance, perhaps to reclaim dignity. Invitations were sent, chandeliers polished, and music prepared to mask the gnawing fear within. But the city was awake now. The whispers of the soldier-turned-president had ignited curiosity and expectation. Guests arrived cautiously, eyes flicking toward the mansion as though sensing that tonight the world might tilt on its axis. Inside, the gala was dazzling and discordant. Crystal glasses clinked, laughter echoed, and the orchestra played melodies meant to soothe nerves. Yet beneath the surface, every footstep, every whispered conversation carried tension. The family moved through the room with smiles that did not reach their eyes. They had underestimated the power of truth, and it would not forgive their arrogance. Then, as the music reached a crescendo, the doors opened. Silence fell like a sudden night. He entered not with ceremony, not with fanfare, but with a quiet presence that filled the room more completely than any orchestra ever could. Ibrahim Traoré, the man they had mocked, the soldier they had scorned, the rejected suitor. They all saw him now, not as a man seeking vengeance, but as one whose destiny had been fulfilled. Gasps echoed, eyes widened, and the daughter's tears fell freely. She had not expected this. She had not imagined the quiet authority in his stride, the unwavering calm in his gaze. He did not speak. He did not need to. His presence alone conveyed the weight of truth, the inevitability of justice. The family froze, their arrogance dissolving into fear, confusion, and disbelief. Their wealth could not protect them. Their pride could not shield them. They were exposed in the harsh light of what they had denied, and the city saw it all. The father stammered, searching for words that would command or excuse, but none came. The mother clutched her hands to her chest, her illness making each breath a battle. The brothers looked at one another, the bravado of youth crumbling under the reality they had ignored. And through it all, the daughter's gaze remained fixed on Ibrahim, a mixture of awe, shame, and longing frozen upon her face. Yet he did not confront them. He did not demand apologies. There were no threats, no public denunciations, no show of dominance. He simply allowed them to feel the weight of what they had chosen, the magnitude of their folly, and the silent consequence of pride unchecked. The room itself seemed to shrink, walls closing as if the mansion were alive, punishing them in quiet, subtle ways. Outside, the people gathered in shadows, waiting, watching, feeling the tension ripple through the city. Some had risked the rain to see the spectacle. Others had heard the whispers that promised revelation. And when word spread of his entrance, the murmurs swelled into cheers. For the soldier had become a symbol of integrity, of patience, of resilience, and the city recognized in him the embodiment of justice long denied. The night stretched, and the gala became a tableau of consequence. The family could not hide. Their smiles cracked, their laughter faltered, and every gesture betrayed the unease gnawing at their foundations. Even in their attempts to maintain composure, subtle accidents plagued them. Spilled wine, flickering lights, a sudden draft that toppled decorations. Whether by chance or the quiet orchestration of fate, the evening pressed upon them like a silent reckoning. Meanwhile, Ibrahim moved through the gala without attention, his eyes observing, his mind cataloging the suffering outside these walls. He thought of the children who slept hungry, the mothers who whispered prayers that went unanswered, the fathers who labored with no reward. He thought of the nation as a whole, and in that reflection he found clarity. The rejection of love, the arrogance of wealth, the fragile illusions of the privileged, all of it paled before the larger mission. To lead with purpose, to serve with dignity, to rise not for revenge but for the hope of a better tomorrow. As dawn approached, the gala ended in quiet chaos. Guests departed, whispers following them like shadows. The family remained, broken and humbled, their pride battered not by violence, but by the revelation of truth. The daughter lingered in the fading glow, her face streaked with tears, her heart heavy with understanding. She had loved him in secret, had mourned him in silence, and now realized the enormity of what she had lost. Not merely a man, but the man who would shape the destiny of their nation. Ibrahim departed without word, disappearing into the streets that had once known only hunger and hardship. The people saw him, and in their eyes he glimpsed the reflection of what he truly was, not merely a president, not merely a soldier, but a symbol. A quiet force that moved through shadows and storms, whose strength lay in restraint, whose power lay in patience, whose heart remained unbroken despite rejection and scorn. The mansion stood silent as the first rays of light cut through the night. Its walls, once a fortress of pride, now echoed with the invisible tremors of consequence. Wealth could not shield them. Status could not save them. Arrogance had been exposed in the most cinematic of ways, by the calm, unyielding presence of the man they had refused to see. And far beyond the gates, the city began to stir with hope. Children laughed a little louder, mothers spoke prayers with renewed faith, fathers straightened under the weight of the dawn. The presence of Ibrahim Traoré, once a private sorrow denied by a family, had become a public symbol of what was possible when dignity met destiny. The city awakened to a light sharper than any before, as if the night itself had been holding its breath. The mansion, once a monument to pride and privilege, seemed smaller now, diminished not by bricks or stone, but by the weight of truth pressing against its walls. Its halls echoed with absence. Servants whispered in corners, afraid to move too loudly, while the daughter sat in quiet reflection, her hands trembling as she traced the edges of a silk dress that had once been her armor. The laughter and music that had filled the rooms the night before were gone, replaced by silence, the only sound a subtle reminder that nothing would ever be the same. Ibrahim walked among the city's streets, stepping lightly over puddles reflecting the early sun. Children ran toward him with innocent curiosity, their eyes wide with awe at the man who moved through the ordinary world as though it had always belonged to him. Mothers touched his sleeve as he passed, seeking blessings he did not bestow with ceremony, yet offering them all the weight of reassurance. Fathers nodded silently, seeing in him not a politician, not a soldier, but a promise that dignity and justice were not illusions. Every step he took seemed to leave behind an invisible trail of hope, a ripple that stretched from the poorest alley to the grandest avenue. The family's despair was no longer private. Word of the gala, of their exposed arrogance, spread through every level of society. Associates who had once courted them with deference turned away, unwilling to be tied to shame. Business partners withdrew deals. Colleagues whispered rumors of incompetence and foolishness, and friends distanced themselves from the household that had mocked a man they could never understand. The father, once proud and commanding, found his voice faltering under the weight of his own folly. The mother's illness worsened, her hands trembling with a fragility she had never known. The brothers avoided mirrors, each image reflecting the hollowness of the man they had believed themselves to be. And the daughter, with eyes wide and heart broken, finally understood the depth of what had been denied. Not just love, but wisdom, integrity, and vision. The streets, however, were alive with a different kind of energy. Markets that had long been quiet now buzzed with cautious optimism. Mothers whispered not of fear, but of stories passed from neighbor to neighbor. Tales of a man who had endured rejection, endured suffering, yet remained unbroken. Fathers told their children of the soldier who walked among them, invisible in the shadows, carrying both humility and power. And children, whose laughter had been muted by hunger, found a rhythm in their steps that mimicked the certainty of destiny. Ibrahim understood that the family's downfall, though poetic in its precision, was not the true victory. True victory lay in the hearts of the people. He had been denied a private joy, but in that denial he discovered a purpose far greater than himself. He moved not to punish, but to illuminate, to show that pride and cruelty, no matter how insulated by wealth and power, could not withstand the quiet persistence of truth. The daughter, who had once been a symbol of fragile beauty constrained by arrogance, began to see a different world through the lens of his presence. Though her own heart ached, she recognized in him a force far larger than personal desire. She began to understand that love, when entwined with destiny and virtue, cannot be confined by walls of wealth or walls of fear. It is expansive, inexorable, a quiet yet unstoppable tide. And so the city shifted. Neighborhoods once resigned to despair now felt a pulse in their veins. The soldier rejected by a family became the beacon of a community. He walked silently past the shanties and narrow streets, greeting no one in particular, yet affecting everyone. His presence was not demanding. It did not command, but it transformed. Where shadows had once loomed, light now lingered. Where voices had whispered quietly, they now spoke boldly of justice, dignity, and the possibility of change. In the mansion, the family could no longer cling to illusion. The father sat by a window, staring blankly as morning spilled over the city. The mother, frail and weakened, could only watch the world move outside her sealed doors. The brothers avoided each other, each haunted by the awareness that their arrogance had been exposed to a world they had thought beneath them. And the daughter, having loved and lost in silence, felt a clarity she had never known. That some forms of power are invisible, yet infinite. Some forms of loss are lessons disguised as punishment. Ibrahim did not return to the mansion. He did not need to. His victory was not in confrontation, nor in spectacle, but in the subtle unveiling of truth. His existence had shifted the balance, and the family, the city, and the nation could all feel it. The mansion, now a symbol rather than a fortress, would stand as a reminder that arrogance falters when faced with patience, dignity, and unseen strength. By mid-morning, the city had fully awakened. People moved with a renewed purpose. Street vendors smiled as coins changed hands. Children's laughter rang through the alleys. Mothers spoke to each other with warmth instead of desperation. And fathers, carrying their burdens with steadier shoulders, glimpsed in every corner of the city a promise that survival was not the only goal. Hope, too, could thrive. Ibrahim walked to the edge of the city, where the hills met the sky. From this vantage, he could see not the mansion, not the shame of a family, but the vast expanse of a nation waiting to be shaped. The streets below were alive, imperfect yet resilient. He understood that rejection had been a crucible, not a condemnation. The love denied him, the scorn he endured, the arrogance he faced, all had forged him into a man capable of inspiring more than fear or obedience. He could inspire belief. And in that quiet dawn, he raised his eyes to the horizon, imagining what could be. The nation's hunger, its suffering, its desperation, they were not chains but catalysts. The family's folly had been a small part of a larger truth. That integrity, courage, and patience would always find their stage, no matter how long it took. The people who had once whispered about a rejected soldier now spoke his name with reverence. He had become more than a man. He had become a symbol, a force that carried both the weight of justice and the promise of redemption. Somewhere in the mansion, the daughter watched him go. She understood that the man she had once denied had transcended the personal, had moved into the realm of legend. Her grief mingled with admiration, a complex tide of emotion that could not be undone. And as the sun rose fully over the city, casting its golden glow upon streets and rooftops alike, she whispered a silent acknowledgement that some losses, though painful, are the genesis of greater truths. Ibrahim's footsteps carried him down into the heart of the city once more. Children ran alongside him, mothers held their heads higher, and fathers carried themselves with newfound resolve. The nation, small and vast at once, breathed in the promise of what was possible. Every glance, every whisper, every heartbeat of the city seemed to pulse in tandem with his presence. He did not speak of power. He did not demand recognition. He simply walked, letting the world see what dignity and courage could accomplish when paired with patience, humility, and vision. By the end of the day, the mansion stood quiet, the family contained within the walls of consequence. The city, however, thrummed with life, energized by the revelation of truth and the demonstration of quiet authority. Ibrahim Traoré had been denied love, but he had not been denied purpose. The rejection that had once seemed cruel had, in truth, become the catalyst for something greater, a testament to endurance, a lesson in patience, and a symbol that true strength is measured not by wealth or status, but by the ability to transform personal loss into collective hope. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across streets and rooftops, Ibrahim paused one final time to survey the city he loved. He did not claim victory with shouts or gestures. He claimed it silently, in the knowledge that the world had changed because of the quiet force of integrity and courage. For some losses, some rejections, and some cruelties are not endings. They are beginnings, and in that moment, he wondered, as a whisper only he could hear, whether this was the moment a nation learned to rise, not through wealth, nor privilege, nor fear, but through the resilience of truth, the patience of endurance, and the courage of one man who had walked through rejection to illuminate the path for all.